this one last year, if I recall. Drush Aleph. So this one is a little bit more, the Drush Aleph is a little bit longer. It's not that much longer, but it's a little bit longer. We'll go through this one. So the question is like this. The first Parshat, the first part of this week's, the first Aliyah. Excuse me, the first Aliyah goes, Vayikra Moshe leHoshea ben Nun Yehoshua. And it said Moshe gives an extra name. He calls Yehoshua ben Nun. He calls him Yehoshua. Perush Rashi, Yah Yoshiacha me'atzat meraglim. That's Rashi says based on the Midrash and also in Masechet Sotah. It says that Hashem Yud Kei should save you from the advice or like the not so positive advice of the meraglim. Now already from that, what do we know? What can we understand from that? If the Midrash is if Rashi is saying that Midrash already now, that we already know then their thought process was what? Was not necessarily positive. Right, it wasn't so positive, exactly. Because otherwise, why would you have to say what? Why would you have to say Hashem should protect you from the advice of the spies? Right? Now, Moshe kind of understood that maybe there was something not so kosher going on. But let's put that aside for a second.
Well, it's just important to know.
Yeah.
In the Aliyah Shana, that's the naming before they've even done anything.
Yeah.
Just mentioning the names of each tribe, and
right.
That's what it's added. So we don't even, it's like the name change happens before we know anything's happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what Rashi points out. And that already gives you some of the Mefarshim. What do they say? The Mefarshim already say that doesn't make sense. How did he know it was going to happen before it happened? Mm-hmm. Like, why would Moshe need to say, I'm protecting you now? Nothing happened yet. You need protection? What is going on here?
As though he knows
right, exactly. So that's a good question. Anyway, that's not what for this part, but right? So he says, according to this, we should have just done what? One letter would have been enough. Why does it say Ya Hoshiani? Right? Ya Yoshiacha. Ya is Yud Hey, right? And what did he really add? Yud. He didn't add Yud Hey. Rashi says Yud Hey Yoshecha.
Because it included his name already.
Right. So there's no real. Good question, right? It's a very good question. We all think of Hashem. Hoshea becomes Yoshua. So he added the Yud. But according to the Midrash, it actually says that Moshe added Yud and Hey. That's not correct. He says. First, Moshe says, Hashem should protect you. Like a little bracha. Hashem should protect you. Right? And the second thing is, I'm going to give you a little extra letter on your name. So the Zera Shimshon asks, why do you need both? You could have had one of those should have been enough. Right? Either add a letter to your name or two letters to your name, whatever we say, or give you a bracha. But you don't need both. What's the reason that we get both? So he says like this. So
One second. Moshe adds gift to Hosea.
Right.
And he gives him a bracha.
Doesn't say give him a bracha.
It says, Ya Yoshiacha me'atzat meraglim. That's like the bracha.
But it's kind of like when you do something and then you give the bracha.
And you give a speech.
It's like, here's the yud and here's why.
Right. But still, the way he interprets it.
like a birth speech.
Yeah. Right. So he says, according to Zera Shimshon, seems to say is the Yud Hey and to pray for him seems to be two separate things. That's the way I understand it. I mean, again, so he says, V'yesh lomar tika b'sefer Azar. Right. That's okay. Good. Ask question.
Gershom also gives an explanation for the name.
Right. Right. So he says here, the Zera Shimshon starts his answer by saying, according to, again, the Zohar, he says that the spies, right, al pasuk kulam anashim, that we know that's the first pasuk, kulam anashim hema, Rashel b'nei Israel, they were leaders, kulhu zakayin havu, the reishe d'Yisrael havu, about inun devaru legarmayu etabisha, right? So he says like this, he says, they were all leaders of the Jewish people. They were definitely people who had the merit, the zchut, to do what they were supposed to do. It says, but yet, in some way, for some reason, they decided to create a plot, devise a plot that was not necessarily positive. Why did they devise this plot? Amai netalu etada. Why did they make this whole plot? Ela amri I ye'ilun Yisrael ara Nitaber ana meheve rishon v'imane Moshe rishon achrinin daha ana zachinin b'midbar lemeheve rishon aval ba'ar lo nizke.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
So the Zohar says basically is these people were not, like you said, the people were definitely leaders. So why did they start going to this whole crazy plot? Why did they make the plot twist? We were 10 feet about to cross the finish line, and they say, let's turn back around and go back around. So what's the point?
Who picked these leaders? Moshe.
Moshe picked it, right? So
they weren't just, they were doling.
Yeah.
So
So
just like,
to see him.
Right.
Like these seem in the secular sense, like, the president of the shul.
Right. No. So
Wasn't there a lot?
I don't remember hearing a story about a lot.
Because it's 12, no, you're right, that's something else. That's the Skenim. The Skenim was a lot.
Right.
That was 70, and you had 2 tribes and only had 5.
So anyway, so the question is, if you have these leaders, if you have the leaders, so the question is, why did the leaders come up with this whole plot twist? So they say, the Zohar says that the reason why they did this is they said, wait a minute, if we get into Eretz Yisrael, then all of a sudden Moshe is going to pick new leaders.
Because we're the Galut leaders.
We're the leaders of the Midbar. We're not the leaders of Eretz Yisrael. So we have to somehow stall, right? The stall tactic, right? If I don't know what's going to happen, what do? I stall, right? So I come up with, they start creating this whole twist of a plot to avoid Bnei Israel going into Eretz Yisrael. Because they need Bnei Israel to stay in the Midbar, because that's where they can lead. So what does that really come under be? It's base Gaiva, exactly. It's all about Gaiva. And then he's going to go into this in a second. But then he says like this, right? As soon as, if we'll be removed from being leaders, that's what the Zohar says, and Moshe will appoint new leaders, and therefore what? For in the Midbar, we have the merit of being the leaders. But in Eretz Yisrael, we're not going to have that, and therefore what? We're going to basically see is that we're going to lose our spot, and therefore we want to stay leaders, right? Every good politician wants to stay in their spot. So if that's the case, what do? We have to create a situation. We have to twist. What?
Yeah, but don't need us to stay.
Right. We have to keep the situation in our favor, right? We have to be in our favor, not turn it around for them for us to lose their position, right? Because what happens to politicians who lose their spot? They become irrelevant, and then for what happens? Nothing. They lose their spot. So the whole thing here right now, so far, it's very selfish. V'ho'il, right? Oh, sorry. V'katvu mekubalim. Now the mekubalim have written. This is in the Rav Chaim Vital says, Sheshem Yud Hey eno sheresh al balei gava. The Shem Yud Hey does not reside upon people who are arrogant. The Gava b'gematria Yud Hey. Yud Hey and Gava are actually the same exact gematria, and therefore he says that Yud Hey is kind of above Gava. It's stronger. It's the opposite. Yeah, it's the opposite. Right. Gava and Yud Hey are the opposites of each other. Exactly. The alter ego. Very good. It's the kryptonite, if you will. It's the kryptonite of Gaiva.
Antimatter.
Exactly. So he says, Ho'il, he says, V'ho'il sha'elu anashim chatu michmat ga'ava shenityaru she'aviru mehem agdula liot rashim. So since we now know that the main sin of the 10 tribes, 10 out of the 12 was Gaiva, right? And they were scared that what's going to happen? They were scared that they were going to lose their position. The name of Hashem could not reside upon them, right? To save them. Mishum hachil ramoz al zer hosif ot echat me Hashem v'nitztarfa im ot rishona shel Hosea shehi hey ve'amar ya Hosheacha. Klomar ra'ui hu she'Hashem Yosheacha lefi shaya anav kedei shelo yachto kmo hahem vezo ena tefila mamash ela sheniret kmo tefila uvemet ena ela tana be'echrach kedei lekabel ezrom kodesh. We were saying exactly. In other words, it wasn't really a tefillah, right? The way Zera Shimshon interprets it originally is that it's some sort of tefillah. And he says, no. The hey was there already. The yud, Moshe actually added just one letter. And the whole point is that the yud and the hey from Hoshea's name originally together, kilu, will counterbalance the ga'ava that these spies had. And therefore he's saying is that it wasn't really a bracha. It was rather kind of interpreting or explaining, instilling, like you said, like the bris speech, right? It's like I'm
back to what we're saying.
Exactly. He literally says that. He literally says just that. He says that the yud.
He says that?
No, something similar. He says that the yud was what was actually added to his name.
Yes.
The hey was part of Hoshea's name originally. Right. The yud hey is the counterbalance to Gava. Gava and yud hey are the same gematria, and he says that they basically counterbalance. So anyone who has Gava, the name yud hey can't work. because they fight against each other. And he says, so therefore,
It means one or the other.
right.
They didn't know what to do with the name.
So right. So then he
Moshe
says,
gave them a name. They didn't know what to do with it.
right. So he says. So here he says. Then it wasn't actually a tefillah. What was happening is that he added just one letter, and it wasn't really a tefillah. It was just rather it works well with it like fits in nicely. The Yud Hey and Hosea, Yoshua, Ya Yosheacha, whatever. Now,
It was only for Yeshua, it wasn't for them.
right.
What do
What?
you mean, what is this statement saying? It didn't protect them because they had guidelines. It wasn't meant for them, it was meant for Yeshua. He got the letter.
It was meant to prevent. It was meant to protect him from their gaiva.
Right.
Right. It wasn't. It was a tefillah for.
It was only for him, right.
It was right. Correct. That was right.
But you're saying it didn't protect them.
No. It couldn't protect them because the Yud Hey.
Like Moses,
It couldn't protect them because it wasn't given to them.
No, because they couldn't reside on them because their gava wouldn't allow
He
it.
didn't give them the Yidden, he gave it to Yeshua.
Right. That's fine. That's fine.
It
It was
wasn't going to get them at all. Start from the beginning.
correct. It wasn't meant for that. Yeah. That's fine. Okay. Because yeah.
it seems like Moses, the guy who he likes, the guy who he's been training, is Yeshua.
Right.
Princess.
Right.
He somehow worked his way in. We don't know the full story of how it got started. Kalev is the surprise character. Like Kalev links up with Yeshua, and we don't know from the beginning.
Batman and Robin.
That's rough though, because Batman goes through a lot of Robins in the written stories. but
No, he's about to ask the question: why does he only address Yehoshua and not Kalev? In a second.
Yes.
This is the next question.
Yeah, I'm not listening. Yeah.
Okay, so he says like this. Then the question is, "V'hashta nicha shitpel al Yoshav v'lo al Kalev." So he says, now we understand. Now we can understand, based on what we just said. Now we can understand why Moshe davens or says something nice, adds a letter, whatever we say, to Yoshua and not Kalev. Divish lama Yoshua hayam mechuzak bo shaya anav misharto Yoshua ben nunar lo yamish mitoch haol bevadai shaya bitladek b'darkei rabo. Right? Ichtiv va'ish Moshe anav mod. Right? So we say is Yehoshua. It wouldn't be surprising for us if that Yehoshua is so modest and follows the letter of the law that Moshe did, because he was literally didn't leave the he didn't leave.
Yes, where did he start? His beginning started, he was cleaning the shul.
Right, exactly.
That was his,
Right. So the point is that right, but right. So the point is that his model, his role model was Moshe. So it's not surprising that his anava, his modesty, his actions were exactly like Moshe's. No one's surprised by that. Like you said, the surprise character here is Kalev, right? Aval Kalev, but with respect, lo haya Moshe kol kach mechuzak bo, umishum hachi lo yitpalel alav. So he wasn't sure that Kalev was really going to be as humble as Yoshua.
I would have thought the other way around.
I would have thought the exact same thing.
I would have said,
In my,
some help.
yeah, exactly.
Potential.
That's exactly. I think last year when we learned this Torah, I said the exact same thing. I said it's the opposite. You would think that Kalev should have gotten the bracha and not Yoshua because Yoshua knows what to do.
Right.
Exactly. That's my question. That was my question last year. I seem to remember that. Anyway, so he says, "Mishum hachi lo yitpalel alav." Now, v'katuv shel Yonatan miyuzol mesayenu. He says, let's look at. That's the Torah Natan, which is he doesn't quote it often. The Zera Shimshon doesn't quote it often, which is interesting. But he says like this: "V'chad chama Moshe an v'tanute." Moshe, when Moshe saw his humility, that is Kara Moshe Hoshea bar Nun Yoshua. He called Hosea Yoshua ad kan. He quotes it. He says before continuing, he says that basically before he continues, why we have to explain now why did Moshe add and daven for Yoshua? Zera Shimshon goes on a tangent, and he's going to come back to it in a second. So he says like this. He says that there he pitched his tent. Later on over there. Anyways, we go there. So he says, now he says, why did Moshe pray only for Yoshua? There's a lot of commentary. A lot of Mefarshim ask the same question. The same question. When you're asking the same question, we're not the only ones. The question really does not even begin. What better reason was there to daven for Mishar Reglim? Why should, if we're going to say he should have davened for Kalev, then if he should for all of them, right? Exactly. Once you say Kalev, you have to say all, right? Because you can't say, oh, Kalev and Yoshua, yes, and 10 no.
Well, maybe he's leaning towards one way.
So hold on. So that's exactly. So he says, Sharei Be'otosha, there was no reason for any of them at that moment when Moshe first saw their mission. Assuming that we understand the storyline the way it is, we assume that Moshe had good intentions, meaning they walked to Moshe and said, we want to go in. Their intentions were pure, quote unquote. right? So if we understand that, so if Moshe's thought process was, okay, they're going to go in to do what they want. They explained it the way they explained it to me. I understood it to be that's very pure intention. At face value, exactly. Right? They were all ksherim at that moment. Okay, that moment, that specific moment. Right? Had he davened for Kalev at that moment, he should have done what? Davened for all of them, that they would come back with positive results. Now that's a good question also. Why didn't Moshe daven for all of them? Right? That should have been the question also. That's a good question, but that doesn't get answered here. Right? So he says he should have prayed for all of them. Right?
Wait, one second. What? He gives it to Yeshua. What do you mean he prayed for Kalev?
He didn't pray for Kalev. That's the point. Is why didn't he? The question is why did he say yes to? Why did he give a bracha to Yeshua and not to Kalev? Right, he gives this whole speech, this whole nice thing. Okay, that's nice, but what about everyone else? And what about Kalev, who also Kalev is, like you said, is this surprise fact, unsung hero. We don't understand what's going on. So if he's going to daven for Yeshua, he should daven for Kalev too. But at the very least, and he says, well, at the beginning, he doesn't daven for all of them because originally Moshe's thought process was that their intentions were pure. So therefore, there's no need. Exactly.
Okay. Then why do you for Yeshua?
Okay, hold on. He's going to go back. So he says like this. So he says like this. He says, this kind of prayer was not really usually appropriate. Moshe היה מתיירא, פן כולם או רובם או מקצתם יתהפכו להרע, ולחלב נמי אפשר שיהיה מקומם. So בעיני משה היו אז כולם כשרים, דאילאו הכי לא היה שולחם כלל. Right? So he says why is this kind of tefillah not appropriate? He says that every person has free will. Every person has free will, right? Every person has the ability and desire, right? And indeed at this moment, right, he said that all of them, or most of them, or some of them even, he says, they might turn evil. And also it could be that maybe Kalev would have done too. So he didn't want to give a bracha, and all of a sudden they're going to be like, why do you need to daven for us? We're pure. In other words, he's saying is that if Moshe starts davening for them, what are they going to understand it to be? They're going to be like, wait a minute, Moshe, you don't trust us? Right? Do you understand? The question he's kind of saying is like, what the Zera Shimshon is saying is...
privately.
Right, privately, sure, but again, had you daven privately, then the Chumash wouldn't tell us anyways, right? It's only if it's daven publicly. So he's basically saying at this point, right, we understand, the way I understand what he's saying is that had he made a comment of like, you guys should all be okay, let's daven together, like whatever, they would have said, Moshe, we got this. Like they would have said, Moshe, what, you don't trust us? Right? Like, why are you telling us, giving us the warning before, and you don't trust us? So at the moment before they get sent out, before they go out, it's like the teenagers who are about to go on a trip, and their parents tell them, "Be on your best behavior." What happens when the parents turn around? What happens? The kids go out and party, and they're like, "Yeah, we're free," right? Same thing. Like Moshe sees them and says, "Okay, their intentions are good, so therefore I trust them," right? But right, of course they have free will to do what they want, but I can't. I'm not going to give out this whole thing. So he says, he did not say, in other words, yes, he might be concerned that they might be not necessarily the most positive, but outside of Safek, רצה לתמוך ידי יהושע בתפילה ניצחת שמן השמיים לא ינחל להיות ניסת בעצתם אם יבואו בכלל עצה רעה הואיל שהיה עניו כנזכר. But since he was so humble and deserving of such special bracha, Moshe felt that it was appropriate to give a bracha only to Yeshua and not to everyone. His humility basically warranted his bracha that was above and beyond everyone else. The other 11, Moshe says, there's a chance that my bracha might not even go on them because what's going to happen? They have the free will to turn on it. So why should I didn't say why, but he says I'm most concerned about Yeshua's humility. And his humility could be a strength. It could also be a weakness. Right? The weakness is that if you're so humble, you may get pulled along, right? You may get dragged along, or you might so humble you won't say anything, but you'll find the right moment to do some sort of action. That's why Moshe says, "Okay, I'm going to give you."
It could also be that Moshe noticed that if he kind of what you said beforehand, that if he thought that there's any chance that his tefillah will work,
right?
It's dafka on Yeshua because he's so anav,
right?
So he wouldn't misunderstand the interpretation of tefillah,
right?
Like you said about
exactly right. So he says like this. Now that's one answer.
One second.
Yeah.
They were all leaders except for Caleb and Yeshua, right? Wow.
They were all leaders, yes. They were all leaders, yeah.
Who was Caleb? Where did he come from?
No, he was also a leader. Caleb was also a leader.
Okay, so I have to tell you something. Simply, think about it. He's your protege.
Right.
You're setting him out to the ring with all this gadol. You gotta give him some chizuk.
Caleb or Yoshua?
Yeshua.
Yeah, it's exactly what he's saying is exactly that. He says, you of all people, Yoshua, you need the chizuk the most.
Because you're an honor, but also you shouldn't, because you think that they're so great, and then you're an honor that you're going to follow them. You need chizuk.
Right. So that's exactly what Moshe was.
He was Yotzim Klal.
Right. That's exactly what he's saying is Yoshua was the exception to the rule. The 11 other people were leaders. But his modesty could be viewed as either a strength, and therefore he won't say anything. Therefore, Moshe needs to give him a bracha, or because he didn't say anything, he needs a bracha even more. Right? Either way, you look at it as in comparison to the other leaders, their intention is purely arrogance. They're pure arrogance.
His stature was even known yet. It was like David before it became well known.
Exactly.
Right? And you imagine you got the most Gadol Torah in front of you, right? And you walk in.
And even though you're
what are you gonna do? Like, okay, whatever you say, right?
Right. So exactly, that's exactly right. So that's answer number one, is that Moshe gave a bracha specifically to Yoshua because he was his protege, and therefore he felt that the bracha he would need the bracha the most because the behaviors should.
This was his first public act.
Yeah, his first public public act. Yes, his debut. Yes,
Debut, yeah.
this is the Yoshua.
There is
Yeah.
a real correlation with
August and
David
everything
and
after.
You think about that, how they both came out of obscurity
Right.
to be the leaders. And if you're looking around for a leader, you're not going to look at Yeshua at that point.
Right.
You're not. Just like you weren't going to look at
Shaul
David.
was the same story.
So anyway, so we're gonna go through the next drush, the next piece of the drush, and then I'm gonna repeat my story that I opened the Zera this Torah with, today's lesson with, because I want everyone. I made a point that Charles said you must repeat the story 1,000,000 times. I'll tell you, it's personal Zera Shimshon in front of my today. But the last 2 days, I'll say it again. Okay. So he says another reason why Moshe davened only for Yoshua. It says, "Oh yesh lomar b'tirus kushatim meforshim." Why did he daven only for Yoshua, not the others? It seems like he's showing favorites, right? And that's also a very simple question.
By the way, another thing is, I would have said, you said, oh, maybe he's the humble guy. I would say, who's this Yoshua who's been with Moshe until now, been his sidekick, so to speak?
Right.
And maybe he's got extra favoritism with Moshe.
That's exactly what he's saying. He's asking the question. He says it doesn't make sense.
And he does.
He does have it, but he questions why daven from him. If you're davening from him, you're even showing more favoritism.
Exactly.
It's more of it's not necessarily the positive thing. Right. So he says, "Is Dita b'sefer Zera Barach." Zera Barach is a 1600, 1700 Mefarish. Yeah, he mentions it. It seems to be like he was like that was like.
Enlightened or anti-enlightened?
No, definitely anti-enlightened, but he was around the same time as the Zera Shimshon, definitely.
Darkened.
Yeah, V'shem ha'ari, and he says, he quotes the Ari HaKadosh, he says, so he says, he says, "Atabich nisatam la'aretz, atzar kadosh baruch hu sheitaber be'elu yud bet nisim nishmat yud bet shvatim kidei letaken otam lo yichtu." So he says, now again, I don't get everything about what's going on in the Zohar or Kabbalah, but he says is that when they entered Eretz Yisrael to go spy the land, Hashem wanted that the souls of the 12 tribes, the 12 Nisim, could kind of basically do is move into the lives of these 12 of the 12 tribes. Yeah, encapsulate the 12. In other words, the 12 Nisim should kind of follow suit or follow in the footsteps of the 12 tribes. Kilu l'takein k'tzat of what they v'lo yechetu. In other words, so that way they would not sin that they did in the past. What did the 12 tribes do? We know that there was Lefachot Michirat Yosef is one that we know about.
Brothers.
Right. So they're saying these 12 tribes sinned. So now these 12 Nisim we're supposed to do is take the role of the 12 and kind of correct that which happened in the past.
Sin of the brothers.
Yeah, well, I don't like to use that word, but yes, we'll use those words. There's an obvious reason why not.
They came up with it in the first place.
Exactly. So they would not sin, and as it did. Im kol zeh lo ho'il klum. Omnam Levi nitgalgel b'Yoshua. So he says Levi moved in. According to this, Levi goes into Yoshua. Now, how does he get to that? I don't know. I didn't follow.
One second.
Levi of the 12 tribes.
The tribes become the avatar of the brothers.
Correct.
And
Levi Yoshua goes into Levi.
Correct.
Levi.
Yoshua.
Correct.
goes into
Levi.
Levi.
Correct. Okay.
Levi, who's-
Even though Yeshua was from Shevet,
meaning like
Yeshua, Shevet,
Benjamin.
Menashe,
Menashe, Yeshua ben Nun,
Ephraim.
I think it's Ephraim. I think Ephraim. I'm not looking at the Pesukim right now.
Ephraim.
I believe so. Anyways, the point is that he goes into Levi. Now, how does it? That's again. This is based
Well,
on.
he's staying with the original message, and I mean he's not trying to overthrow Moses' intention the way that Levi kind of comes to overthrow his father's intentions.
Right, and that right,
On a couple of occasions.
exactly. So he says here, Kevan since they had no portion. So he says, Ki shevet Levi lo shalach meragel. The tribe of Levi itself did not send a spy. Kevan she'en lo chilek. Since
Because they were Kohanim.
right, they were Levim or Kohanim. But either way, Shevet Levi doesn't have a portion of land, and therefore Yeshua.
The public servants.
Exactly, and so Yeshua takes the role of the public servant who has no spot, no role, meaning it's like 11 and 1,
because
and therefore,
Yosef, Menashe, and Ephraim,
right,
one of them replaces Levi.
exactly. So that's exactly like he gets to that. He doesn't mention it here, but a different one. He says here like this, Adkan. So he says here, like, oh, here you go. He does say it. He says the Zera Berach there explains, and in this, even though we didn't get to it, but he mentions it here. He says. Zera Berach explains that the tribe of Yosef was represented by Gadi ben Susi from Menashe, whereas the tribe of Levi was not represented by any spy, right? And therefore, the soul of Levi therefore kind of moves into Yoshua of the tribe of Ephraim, the second son of Yosef, exactly what you said, and thus sent as Moshe's personal messenger to represent the tribe of Levi. Wow. Therefore, Me'ata ho'il shenishmat Levi hayta rosh shivto shel Moshe Rabbeinu shel alav shalom. Shapir avad liot makpid alav yoter me'alachrim v'leika masok panim klal mipnei she'atahu davar nogei al atzmo. In other words, Levi and Yoshua, who corresponds to him, were coming basically representing Moshe. And since Moshe is, it's not favoritism, it's for me. It's not because I prefer you. You're representing me here. I need you.
He's a Rebbe, and this is his Talmud.
Right.
So
The Rebbe's Talmud is going to be a shliach.
Moshe, as a tribe of Levi, doesn't go out.
Right.
He doesn't go out as one of the spies.
Correct.
But he allows his soul to transmigrate into Ephraim.
Right.
And as represented by Yeshua, and that's kind of like
Right. So I'm going to start. I'm going to end this just the way I started because we're about to finish. So I'm going to end just the way I started. I start with the story of what happened in the last 3 months, so you can understand that Zera Shimshon literally, for those people who don't believe it, it happened to me personally. I'm going to say it again. So 3 months ago, with where I work, they were announcing budget cuts, and therefore people were going to be called what they called redundant cuts. Okay. So 3 months ago, we didn't know what was going on. There was like very unclear on Purim time. I added davening, whatever. Right. Nothing happened. Pesach time, nothing happened.
Right.
Okay. A month ago, right after Pesach, they said, okay, we now can make announcements. In a few weeks, we're going to tell you which departments are going to get impacted. Okay, fine. A week ago, they say, okay, the marketing department will be impacted. There will be impact. And we're going to have one-on-one, that's one of the department I work in. We're going to have one-on-one meetings with every person, and whoever was impacted will know one-on-one. So as soon as I knew this was 1 week, a week ago, I said, Li Neder, I'm going to give tzedakah, extra tzedakah, if if my job is intact, and I'm going to learn extra Zera Shimshon, and et cetera, et cetera. The day before the call, I got invited to a meeting, a one-on-one meeting with my boss's boss, and it's important that I say my boss's boss, and not my direct boss. So my boss's boss, no, I'll tell you why it's even more impactful in a second. Yeah. So my boss's boss, she says, okay, Wednesday at 10:30, you have a meeting with me. And I was really nervous, mamish nervous, and I said, okay, I'm going to give tzedakah before. As soon as I got the meeting, I said, I'm going to give tzedakah now, b'zchut, that whatever, and I'm going to give an extra amount of money, not a small amount, then bli neder if I get the right, the positive results.
You did b'zchut the Zera Shimshon?
And I said, I'm going to learn extra Zera Shimshon. And I said,
tzedakah wasn't b'zchut.
No, I said, I'm going to learn extra Zera Shimshon, and I'm going to give tzedakah. Yeah. Okay. Then on Wednesday at 10:30, I get a call. She says, you were not impacted. As soon as I finished the call with her, I gave the amount, or almost the full amount. I gave almost the full amount of money, and then I was mashlim almost all of it yesterday at night. So why did I say it was my boss's boss? Because my boss was impacted. Wow. She's on vacation. Last week she went on vacation. She was impacted. And the 2 other people in my team were also impacted by it. So I was like, yeah, that's Nisi Nisim. Like Mamish, I was like, there's. I don't know. There was no. That's exactly. We're a team of. I'm a team of 7. Like we are like it's like I work on multiple teams. Each one of the teams had one person impacted, but not me. In other words, like I work with different people for different projects. Every one of those teams had someone impacted, but not me.
Do they see how you work?
I don't know. I asked, is there like a rhyme or reason? They're like, well, this team we had to have, from this region, this amount of people had to be cut. This region had to have some, and I was just like, I don't understand.
It'd be funny if this basketball came out as they're about to speak when those Zera Shimshon.
But these people are not Jews. They're like, that's the point is like none of these people, I work at a non-Jewish company based in Sweden. I'm the only person in Israel who works in marketing. Like you have to like say like, Mamish Yad Hashem in the thing. I'm telling you, it was wild. Like I told it.
Company based in Sweden?
Yeah, I worked for a Swedish tech company. Yeah.
Woo!
Hi. Anyway, Baruch Adonai Olam Amen v'Amen.
Wow. What are your hours?
Generally about 10 in the morning till about 5:30, 6 in the evening.
And then he finishes Zera Shimshon, he goes to work.
And he still does have
Yeah, what? It's you.
Let's not talk about, he does have